Hey humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, I do videos on creepy and disturbing things, and today we are doing Can't Look Away, episode 3. Before we get into it today, this video has a sponsor. So today I am very proud and very excited to say that this video is sponsored by HannahTheHorrible. As you know, Christmas and all the holidays are right around the corner. If you still need a last minute gift for the true crime lover in your life, or just anyone you can't figure out how to shop for, I highly recommend HannahTheHorrible. Not only is it a super unique gift that I can almost guarantee they won't receive from anyone else, it's gonna be something that they'll actually use. You know what I mean? Like, it's a physical gift, but it's also an experience. The other really cool thing about HannahTheHorrible is that the games are super well designed, so if you personally prefer to be a solo detective, that's totally fine. Like, you can play on your own, you can play with your dog or your cat. But if you do want to play with your family or your friends, it also works great for that too. So the game's just super versatile. But of course, don't take my word for it. The proof is in the Christmas pudding. They have 100,000 active subscribers and they have over 2,000 5-star reviews. With each delivery, you'll sift through piles of evidence, documents, recordings, eliminating suspects, and identifying murder weapons until you crack the case and catch the killer. I personally like playing HannahTheHorrible by myself, although Winnie helps me sometimes. It's just really relaxing, but also super engaging and just something different to do in these super dark winter nights instead of just parking it in front of Netflix all day. Right now, you can go to HannahTheHorrible.com/HannahTheHorrible and use code HORRIBLE for $10 off your purchase. Again, make sure to use code HORRIBLE for a $10 discount. Order by December 13th and get it in time for Christmas. Thank you again so much to HannahTheHorrible for sponsoring today's video. All right, let's get into it. Our first story is Kathy Hobbs. Some people are just dealt a bad hand of cards. This was the case for Kathy Hobbs, who seemingly predicted her own death. Kathy had a hard childhood. Her parents divorced when she was only 8 years old, and her close friend died of a heart condition when she was only in middle school. And to her close family and friends, Kathy frequently spoke about her gut feeling and even her premonitions that she would not live to be the age of 16. And it wasn't a passing comment that she made like every now and then. Her family got so concerned about how often Kathy would talk about this that they decided that they were actually going to move to Las Vegas, hoping that this drastic change and this change of scenery would kind of break Kathy out of these fears and kind of, snap her out of it almost. And for a while, this actually worked. She was adjusting to her new life very well, making new friends. However, that is until her 16th birthday was approaching. Kathy's fears that she would soon die would not leave her even with a moment's peace. It got to the point where she wouldn't even leave the house and stayed locked up in her room, refusing to do anything outside the house. But then Kathy's 16th birthday came and went. She woke up that morning incredibly relieved to find that she was still alive and well. It was like this was finally the proof she needed that the premonitions were not real, but just a symptom of her anxiety. So after her 16th birthday, she finally went back to her normal life. She was willing to leave the house again. And now she was even telling her family that she didn't believe anymore that her premonitions and her fears were based in any truth. So of course her family was extremely relieved, thinking that she had finally kind of passed this portion of her life. Kathy started getting this interest in makeup and beauty, and for the first time in her life, she was actually making plans for the future, and she dreamed of owning a salon of her own someday. But then on July 23rd, 1987, just a few months after Kathy turned 16, Kathy left her house at around 11 p.m. for a quick run to the store to go buy a book. She did ask her friends if they could go with her that night, but none of them happened to be available. Since it was only a couple blocks away from her home, Kathy just went alone, but she never returned. Oddly enough, around 3 a.m. that night, her mom woke suddenly from a deep sleep, feeling as if she had been hit over the head with something. Shortly afterwards, though, her mother claimed she had an odd sensation of calm come over her. Something was coming, but it had passed and it was over. Eventually, she went back to sleep, but woke up in the morning to find Kathy missing from her bed. Her mother called the police and the hunt began. There was evidence that Kathy did make it to the store the night before and had purchased a book just like she said she was going to do at 11:17 p.m. But nothing else was discovered until 9 days later when Kathy, unfortunately, her remains were found in a remote field near Lake Mead. There were unfortunately signs of SA, and the rocks that were used to end her life were also found at the scene. So, as if the premonitions and everything weren't freaky enough, the family, after she passed away, also found letters in Kathy's room that she wrote to them all only 1 month before turning 16. The letters just said how much she loved them all and how they really hoped that she wouldn't be too upset by her death. They were devastated, of course, and on top of everything else, it just seemed like Kathy's premonitions were based in truth. The case was later closed, and it was determined that Kathy was likely a victim to serial killer Michael Lee Lockhart after finding matching fibers from the crime scene in his car. He was executed by the state of Texas in 1997 for not only Kathy's death, but several others. The other thing about this case is that a lot of people actually blame Kathy's mom for her death for letting her go anywhere that late at night. But I kind of think this is unfair personally, just because it was the late 80s, so it was decades ago. We were kind of starting to learn about stranger danger back then, but it was still much less paranoid than it is now. I grew up in the 90s, and even I had a lot more freedom than kids often do today. Plus, it was only like a couple blocks away from their house. And just because she let her daughter go to the store, maybe made a bad call, doesn't mean that she deserves to have her daughter taken away from her. Anyway, regardless of that, let me know what you guys think about this case below. I'd be very curious to know if you think that this is a coincidence, just a very bizarre coincidence, or if Kathy did have some sort of sixth sense and was able to predict this. To me, this whole story sounds like a creepypasta that can't possibly be true, but as far as we know, everything that I just talked about actually happened. If it is a coincidence, it's a very bizarre one. In December of 2020, a man named David Hampson stood in the middle of the road right outside of Swansea Central Police Station in southwest Wales. He blocked traffic and caused all kinds of chaos in the area. David was, of course, soon arrested, but he didn't say a word. He wouldn't talk to the police officers, he wouldn't talk to the lawyers, the court, the judges, the magistrates, no one. But that is not why we're talking about this story. We're talking about this story because this was not the first time that he had done this. In fact, this was David's pattern. David had been arrested and spent time in prison for the same exact crime ever since 2014. He has this pattern of blocking traffic, and when he's arrested, he will not say one word. He then goes to jail, and when he gets out, he does it again in the exact same spot. In 2014, he was charged with willfully obstructing free passage along a highway. The following year, he was convicted of being a public nuisance. This charge resulted in a criminal behavioral order, which basically means that he won't go to jail as long as he stops doing the behavior outlined in said order. But David continued to do it anyway, breaching this court order in 2016, 2017, and 2018. After he got out this last time, he went back yet again in December 2020, as we just discussed. As far as I know, he is currently serving time for this most recent offense. So you're probably thinking, is David choosing not to speak, or can he, for some reason, not speak? Well, it was determined that he could speak, but he was choosing not to. They knew this because some of the prison officers and prison staff, David did talk to them, and he would answer them when they talked to him sometimes, but his answers were always very short. However, they reported that David was actually polite. Unfortunately for David, this puts him in more hot water because it's actually a crime to be able to speak but choose not to in, like in a court of law. The crime is referred to as mute of malice. So we have no idea why David will not defend himself or talk to anybody. And yes, he has been offered not only medical help, but mental health help, with everybody assuming that he must have something going on or be suffering from something to keep doing this. But when they try to do this, he won't cooperate with the doctors either. He just still doesn't say a word to them. This case is very curious. Is this man protesting something? But if that were the case, it wouldn't be very effective if no one knows what his message is and he won't tell anyone. Or my personal theory, David just does not like the outside world. I think maybe he's just one of those very rare people that prefers to stay in prison for his whole life. Perhaps he's just not a violent man. Perhaps he has no desire to hurt anyone physically or emotionally. And so this is like the least impactful crime that he can think of doing that will actually land him in jail, but that he also knows most likely will not actually hurt anyone. This is all speculation, of course, but to me, that seems like the most likely explanation, that he just simply prefers to stay in prison. However, we'll likely never know. This man seems very determined to keep quiet. I actually got the idea to talk about this one by watching a recent video from none other than Anne Reardon from the channel How to Cook That. I love her channel. I watch her videos all the time, but I never in a million years thought that she would talk about something that I could then talk about on my channel, but here we are. In one of her recent videos, she brought something to my attention that I think is just super creepy, and I want to spread it around even more, especially because it doesn't seem like anybody's really talking about it. So we all know about those like channels, 5-minute crafts and So Yummy, etc. These channels are harmful in their own ways, often showing life and baking quote-unquote hacks that could actually be quite dangerous, especially given the young audience that the videos are aimed at. They're often called content farm channels, where they just pump out oodles of content every day with clickbaity titles and very misleading thumbnails, often with pictures of things advertised in the thumbnails that are not even in the video. And in spite of them sometimes having adult themes, it is very clear by the packaging and the nature of these videos that they are targeted at a young audience or even children. I'm sorry, but you cannot tell me that those tacky, cheesy thumbnails that are very colorful, their whole pages are super attractive in that very vibrant, high contrast way. You cannot tell me that that is not aimed at a certain audience. So that is bad enough. That's really annoying, and it's one of those things on YouTube that really makes me mad, but that's not what we're talking about today. There's a new trend forming in the realm of these content farm-like channels. There are these new storytime videos that are primarily over compilations of cookie decorating or cake decorating. This is all fine and good until you hear some of the stories that are being told on these voiceovers. Big offenders are channels such as Sweet Storytime or Spirit Cake Story. As Anne talked about on her channel, there's stories including how a girl was held hostage one time, a teacher who had a student make a move on him, or even other traumatic stories of young girls and their experiences with SA, sometimes even from a friend's dad. One of the other really interesting stories that Anne Reardon found was a story about how a dad punished his daughter's boyfriend by making him wear the girlfriend's swimming suits, taking pictures of him, and then making him post them online. And then there was another one about some very young person in their teens at the latest, letting some stranger into their home as if this was a normal thing to do. So watching the How to Cook That video, I was appalled that this was happening, but I thought, okay, maybe she just found the extreme cases, and while that's messed up, maybe it's not everywhere. No, if you go to those channels, pretty much every video has some sort of disturbing or messed up story in it that I really don't think kids should be listening to. Pretty much anyone that you click on. Here's some examples of stories that I found just clicking on a few of their videos.
Once the clock played its usual 11 p.m. alarm, I wore all black clothes and black sneakers and then sneaked into Fidela's house. I was armed with a few nails, a bat, and some crates of eggs. When I observed that the coast was clear, I went straight to work. I punctured the car tires of everyone in the house, Fidela's, his brother, and their parents. When I was sure that all the tires were just as flat and as empty as Fidela's brain, I took the bat and broke the window on each car. I knew they'd soon hear the ruckus and come out to see, so I had to work fast. I threw eggs into every car until I was sure that they were all drenched. Whew!
I want to tell you how I was held hostage by a crazy guy, and I just couldn't get away. And when I did manage to escape, it got even worse.
Principal obeys all of my commands. Well, he can't say no to me. After all, I know his secret. Only told him yesterday, and though he unhappily agreed to my terms, I was nervous. I was looking at the principal, enjoying his devastation as he watched the school find out about his gambling problem. Now everyone knew that he gambled away the school's valuable art collection and a portion of the school's fund. By the end of the presentation, he was being handcuffed by the police that I called in advance.
So this is also bad enough, but the channels are also being called out by some commenters because they don't put any trigger warnings or content warnings anywhere, not in the title, not in the description, not in the thumbnail, and then they just jump into stories of sometimes very young people experiencing SA. And yes, I know what you're thinking. The stories sound extremely fake. And very likely they are, and just made up for entertainment purposes and for views. But if you look at the comments of these videos yet again, there are many commenters that are accusing the channels of stealing these stories from other channels. Especially the one I primarily see is that very big channel, My Story Animated, which is kind of a content farm of its own accord, but at least the visuals you're being given match the story being told. But regardless, it's very likely that these stories not only are fake, but they're probably stolen.
Today, from My Story Animated, I'm going to tell you the confusing story of how I got abducted by a billionaire.
So again, that's all pretty gross in my opinion, but that's still not even the most gross part. Clearly, as we just covered, these channels are very, very clearly designed to appeal to very young audiences, especially kids. But it's not clear what content they're consuming unless the sound is turned on. Again, credit to How to Cook That for bringing this up because I didn't even realize that until she talked about this. So these kids could be watching these videos with their parents right in the room. And if they're wearing headphones, their parents wouldn't think anything of it because they'd look over, see their kid watching cake decorating and cookie stories, when the kids are actually listening to extremely traumatic stories in some cases, or stories that are talking about kids their age doing extremely dangerous things. I do realize that this is very highly likely inspired by that TikTok trend where teenagers, when they work at Dairy Queen or Starbucks, they're doing story times while they are either decorating cakes, making ice cream, or making drinks, and they are very entertaining. I'll admit I do enjoy those as well. But I think that those are in a different category because, first of all, from what, at least my experience, Gen Z is very good at disclaiming trigger warnings or content warnings. When I'm on TikTok, people even say like warning fake blood for a video. Like they're very good about it. And so I feel like a lot of the videos in the original trend are good at doing that, as well as TikTok just being more aimed at teenagers in general, and they're not dressing up these videos in very colorful, fancy, over-the-top, clickbaity things. But parents may just be letting their kids watch all this content and they think it's G-rated, and it's actually not. It's just, I don't know. For me, it just seems very different because it feels like they are purposely trying to get kids to click on these videos and get addicted to binge watching these videos, knowing that nobody's probably going to catch them because the videos look innocent. That's speculation, perhaps that it wasn't that sinister of an intention, but it just has that vibe to me. It just feels very weird because, as we know, if these content farms actually cared about their audiences, they wouldn't be encouraging life hacks like using a hot glue gun to put toothpaste on your toothbrush. Are you freaking kidding me? Are you kidding me with this? I'm filming this in the afternoon and I had to close the blinds because the sun is like going down and shining right on me. Sorry about the streak. Sorry if the lighting got weird just then. I'm very annoyed, but it's fine. Okay, moving on. For a lighthearted turn, let's talk about how the Mandonia family might have actually encountered a real haunted doll. In 2013, this mother, Emily, gave her daughter an Elsa doll from the movie Frozen. Her husband, Matt, eventually tried to throw the doll out, and when he did, they later found the doll in a wooden bench in their living room. Being rather creeped out by this, Emily and her husband wrapped the doll up in its own plastic garbage bag, stuffed it at the bottom of their regular garbage, and then Matt took it out, and as far as they know, it was taken away by the garbage men. They went out of town, and once they returned, their daughter came back up to Emily and told her that she saw the Elsa doll in the backyard. And sure enough, she had returned. So Emily claimed that the doll started acting really creepy before any of this went down. Elsa had this necklace where like the center gem was a button that you could press and Elsa would sing or talk. She was equipped to speak both Spanish and English, but they said that when they first got the doll, no matter how many times they pressed the button or in what ways they pressed the button, they could not get Elsa to speak Spanish. She only spoke English no matter what. But then about 2 years before trying to throw the doll out, Elsa then started suddenly singing in Spanish and talking in Spanish, sometimes when the doll was completely shut off. And then it just progressed to the point where Elsa only spoke Spanish and would not speak English anymore.
Eres increíble. ¿Jugamos otra vez? Nieve y hielo, a brillar les ordeno.
So at first they were trying to write this whole thing off as a prank, thinking that maybe just somebody bought another Elsa doll and kept putting it in their yard and somehow it put it back in their house or something. Somebody they knew did this. But they knew that it was the same Elsa doll because this Elsa doll had marker marks in certain places from where her daughter had been playing and, made marks on the doll. So they knew it was the same doll. They were positive that the doll had been taken out with trash, etc., etc. So they're very freaked out at this point and they have to get rid of this doll. From her online running group, a man named Chris Hogan volunteered to take the doll off of Emily's hands. Emily gratefully took him up on the offer, wouldn't even put a return address on the box that she sent the doll in because she didn't want the doll to find her address, I guess. She didn't want anybody knowing where to return the doll to. She just wanted the doll out of her life completely. And then when putting Elsa in the box to ship it off, Emily also says that Elsa just started laughing. She turned on her own and was laughing. She said the doll had never done that before. Chris Hogan taped it on the brush guard of his Jeep after the doll had arrived for safekeeping. I assume because he thought it was funny and also thought that would hopefully keep the doll in one place. He even talked to Emily after the doll arrived and they confirmed with each other that the marks on the doll were in the right place so that Emily could have peace of mind knowing that the correct doll showed up at Chris's home. Emily reiterated that she does not think that this is a hoax and that she almost wishes the doll actually was haunted. Because the alternative explanation is that some psycho broke into their home in order to place the doll in the wooden bench, and then that same psycho dug Elsa out of the garbage and then broke into their backyard, trespassing, and put the doll back in their backyard. On a Facebook post where she kind of was answering some frequently asked questions, and people asked if the kids or her husband did it, and she said absolutely not. She did not think that it was possible for either her kids or her husband to be playing a prank on her. Now, while the doll glitching, I do agree that that's pretty creepy, but pretty easily explainable as well. It's just a glitch in the doll. The doll's just malfunctioning. I doubt they would have thought much of all the weird things the doll was doing had this not occurred. Now, I don't know her husband personally, but I cannot imagine that there's any other scenario in this case where her husband was not doing this to play a prank on her. I think that after the glitching started happening in the doll, her husband that probably gave him the idea to do this prank, knowing that his wife already was kind of a little suspicious about the doll. He was conveniently the one who found it in the living room in the first place, and he was conveniently the one who took the trash out. But for all we know, he's not the type of person to do that, or he would have been the type of person to tell her immediately after and let her know that it was all just a joke. So I guess we'll never know because we're not there and we didn't see it happen. I just find this story very interesting. Whether it's an online hoax or not, it's kind of creative. So we're gonna end on a more dark note, I'm sorry, but unfortunately there is not a lot of information about this last case. Hop Nguyen was last seen driving his white Nissan 350Z convertible on State Highway 161 as he was exiting Lower Tarrant Road in Grand Prairie, Texas at 10:30 p.m. on August 17th, 2017. He was never heard from again, and his car was later found abandoned. The day he disappeared, somebody showed up at his doorstep. The Ring doorbell camera caught the man coming up to his home, but the man clearly knew the camera was there and did everything he could to hide his identity. He is wearing a hat, and then he is turned away from the camera as he approaches it with a piece of paper to cover the camera so that his face is never shown. It is very clear this man has ill intentions. And then we hear, even though the camera is covered up, we still have audio, and we hear the man enter Hop's home after what we assume he had to pick the lock or somehow break in because it takes him a second. We don't know if Hop was in the home or not when this occurred, but his family believes that this was possibly when he was abducted. Here's the clip. And that's about all we know. There are a couple theories floating around, of course. Some people believe that his disappearance was gang-related, just because from what we do know, it seemed pretty organized and planned out. Like, that man obviously knew what he was doing. Others believe that perhaps he was followed after somebody saw him in his convertible, and they related a convertible to having a lot of money, so they targeted him to rob, and then the robbery went wrong. But of course, for legal purposes, I have to say that is all speculation. There's no proof or no information on either of those theories. What's also odd is that piece of Ring doorbell footage is the only thing available to the public. Police haven't released anything else, which begs the question, where's the rest of the footage? Was there footage of them leaving the house? Even if the camera was covered with paper, since there was audio, you might have been able to tell exactly when that man left Hop's house and if Hop was with him or not, or if the man was alone or not in general. I mean, it is possible maybe the man knew how to turn off the camera once he was in Hop's home. So maybe that is all the footage that we have. I will give the police the benefit of the doubt. I assume that if there is more footage or if there is more details on this case, they are not releasing it due to not wanting to compromise the investigation since it was never solved. So this was about 4 years ago, and this case, sure enough, is still unsolved. I wish I could give you more details, but like, there's nothing out there, at least nothing that I could find, you know, searching through the internet on this case. Everything is just like a missing persons announcement and then just all the information that I already gave you. Like, there's no info out there. It's really disheartening. Hop was 32 years old at the time of his disappearance, so he would be approximately 36 years old now. He is an Asian male. He's 5'7" and about 165 pounds. He has a half-sleeve dragon tattoo on his right arm and another tattoo that says TFT in big letters on the inside of his right arm. The tip of his right index finger is also missing, and of course there's tons of theories about that as well. But I mention his description because in case you happen to know anything about this case, tips can be called into the Grand Prairie Police Department at 972-237-8255. 8790. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave this video a like just to help the channel out in spite of some of the sad stories. Leave me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you so much to my patrons, especially my top tier patrons: Colin Holmes, Deck of Cards, Creep Me Out, Alice Paul, Ryan Fenton II, Samantha RG08, Michelle Valdivinos, Tom L, JJ, Dirty Kitty, Quasi Eli, Deanna B, and Dawn. But thank you to everyone on the screen.